A 20,000-acre farm is stolen with a few forged papers. A greedy HOA thinks they have the upper hand, but they make a fatal mistake. They underestimate the farmer whose land they just stole. You won't believe his brilliant plan for revenge. Don't miss what happens next. Trash. Karen Duvall's piercing scream tore through the morning peace of Green Valley. She stood with her hands on her hips in front of the main gate of the West Farm, pointing a finger at the oak fence that had been darkened by generations of sun and rain. Behind her, two enforcement officers from the Eden Springs Homeowners Association HOA stood with their arms crossed, dressed in beige, mercenary-like uniforms, with handguns holstered at their hips in a provocative manner. Clay West, on his way to check on his sheep, stopped his old pickup truck. He stepped out, without a hint of rush. The calm eyes of a 62-year-old man looking straight at Karen. "Good morning, Mrs. Duvall." "What's the matter that you have to be so loud out here this early?" "What's the matter?" Karen scoffed, a smile that didn't reach her ice-cold eyes. "This rotten, disgusting fence. It's an insult to the aesthetic of the Eden Springs community. Our regulations state very clearly, all fences must be black, powder-coated iron bars. I'm giving you 48 hours to tear down this pile of scrap and replace it. If not, we'll do it ourselves, and all costs will be added to your bill." Clay almost laughed, but he held it back. He casually dusted off his jeans. "Ma'am, first of all, this farm existed before your so-called Eden Springs even dug its first foundation brick. Second, according to Section 17B, subsection 4 of the state's land law, agricultural structures with a history of over 50 years are exempt from all aesthetic regulations of adjacent residential communities. This fence, built by my great-grandfather, is nearly a century old. It's staying right here." Clay's unexpected legal knowledge momentarily stunned Karen, her face flushed with anger at being lectured by an old farmer. Laws can be changed, Midwest, especially when there's enough money and power to change them. You just wait and see. She turned on her heel, resentfully ordering her two henchmen. "Let's go. This old man will come to regret this." Clay knew this was not an empty threat. Karen Duvall, with her ambition to turn the entire valley into a playground for the rich, had seen his 15,000-acre land as a lucrative prize. She would stop at nothing. And she did not wait long. Just 2 days later, Clay was in the granary when he heard the sound of chainsaws and the harsh clang of metal on metal from the main gate. He rushed out, and the sight before him made the anger inside him erupt. The HOA's enforcement team, this time accompanied by a construction crew, was using chainsaws to cut his family's historic fence to pieces. The sturdy oak posts that had stood for a century now collapsed to the ground like firewood. "Stop it, now!" Clay roared, his voice echoing through the space. "What the hell are you doing on my land?" The HOA's head of security, a man with a brazen face, stepped forward, holding out a stack of papers. "We are simply carrying out our duties on the owner's property, sir," he said with a sarcastic tone. "Perhaps you should update your information. This farm is no longer yours." Clay snatched the papers. His heart felt like it skipped a beat. It was a complete set of land registration documents. The buyer, Duvall Real Estate Holdings. The seller, Clay West. He stared at the signature at the bottom of the contract. A blatant forgery, yet sophisticated enough to deceive unsuspecting eyes. The fraudulent notary seal glittered under the sun. It was all stamped valid by the county registry office. Just then, a luxury car pulled up. Karen Duvall stepped out, wearing sunglasses, dressed in an expensive outfit, looking like a queen arriving to claim her newly conquered territory. She flashed a triumphant smile. "Surprised, Mr. West," she said, her voice as sweet as honey, but as venomous as a snake. "I told you, nowadays, paperwork can solve anything. You can cling to the past. To your outdated laws, we create a new reality. All 15,000 acres of this land, by law, now belong to me." She waved to the construction crew. "Continue level everything for me. I want this place ready for a golf course within a month." An enforcement officer took a step forward, placing his hand on the gun at his hip, an unmistakable threat. They were a private army, protected by wealth and legal loopholes. They were the ultimate expression of arrogance and abuse of power. Clay stood silently amidst the chaos. He watched his ancestors' fence being destroyed, watched strangers brazenly invade the land steeped in his family's sweat and history. The fury within him reached its peak, but it did not turn into despair. Instead, it condensed into something colder, sharper, a will of steel. He lifted his head, looked straight into Karen Duvall's eyes, ignoring the guards and the loud noise of the chainsaws. In his eyes, there was no longer the gentleness of a farmer, but the cold glint of a warrior. "You have made a fatal mistake, Mrs. Duvall," Clay said, his voice low and clear, cutting through the surrounding noise. "You think you've stolen my land with a forged piece of paper, but all you've done is sign the verdict for your own greed." He turned and walked towards the house, ignoring Karen's arrogance and the destruction behind him. The fight was no longer about a fence or petty regulations. This was an all-out war. And Clay West, with the legal legacy of his clan flowing through his veins, was ready to fight back. Clay didn't go back into the house right away. He stood frozen on the porch, a silent witness to the invasion taking place on his own land. The sound of chainsaws had stopped, but now another of Karen's teams was moving in. They weren't destroying, they were building. Cold metal signs with the words "Private Property," Duvall Real Estate Holdings, No Trespassing, were being slammed into the ground along the driveway. Replacing the oaken fence that had just been torn down, men in suits, presumably planners, were walking around arrogantly, using measuring equipment, pointing, and discussing where the first golf hole would be. They acted as if the West family didn't even exist. The humiliation peaked when a county sheriff's car slowly pulled in. The deputy sheriff, a young man named Miller, whom Clay had known since he was a child, stepped out of the car, his face full of unease. He held an official paper in his hand. "Mr. West," Miller said, his voice faltering, unable to look Clay directly in the eye. "I'm sorry, I'm truly sorry, but based on the ownership records validated by the county, I have to serve you with this eviction notice. You and your family have 72 hours to vacate the premises." The eviction notice. Those two words were like a sledgehammer blow. Karen wasn't just taking the land, she was using the legal system itself to kick him out of his own home. Her abuse of power had extended its tentacles even to public authorities. Clay took the paper, his hands perfectly steady. He glanced over it, his calmness making the deputy even more flustered. "You're just doing your job, Miller. I understand." He nodded, a nod not of acceptance, but of confirming who his enemy was. As soon as the police car left, Sarah's car screeched into the yard, its tires grinding on the gravel. She jumped out, her eyes glaring at the Duvall signs and the eviction notice in her father's hand. 72 hours. They're insane, Sarah screamed, the professionalism of a lawyer vanishing, leaving only the horror of a daughter about to lose her home. "I'm going to the courthouse right now. I'll file for an emergency injunction." "Not enough time," Clay said firmly, pulling his daughter's arm into his fortress of knowledge. "Karen has calculated everything. She knows you'd do that. Your motion will get stuck in a pile of red tape. Her inside man will make sure it isn't processed until after the 72 hours are up. By then, we'll be on the street. We can't fight on a battlefield that she has chosen and set up." They stood in the middle of the office, the pressure of time weighing heavily. Outside, Karen's army was still surveying their land. With every passing second, their ownership became more entrenched. "So what do we do?" Sarah asked, her voice laced with desperation. Clay didn't answer right away. He walked to the master plan map of Eden Springs. He looked at it not as a neighbor, but as a wolf searching for its prey's weakness. "Every single house in that glamorous development," he began, his voice low and calculating, "was built with borrowed money. Every amenity, from the tennis courts to the clubhouse, is mortgaged. The Eden Springs HOA itself, To operate that enforcement apparatus and its pack of lawyers must have a cash flow. Karen is like an octopus. Its head is Duval Holdings, and its tentacles are the debts. Don't chop at the tentacles. Attack the head directly. A spark of hope flashed in Sarah's eyes. She rushed to the computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard at lightning speed. Public financial records. Registered mortgages. Here it is. They discovered what Clay had suspected. To get cash quickly for the bribery, forgery, and preparation for this takeover, Karen had made an extremely risky move. She had used the core assets of the Eden Springs community, including the HOA office building, and undeveloped lots to secure a massive bridge loan from the Green Valley Commerce Bank. It was a short-term, high-interest loan due in 90 days. This bank, Sarah said, frowning, is in financial trouble. Their stock dropped 30% last quarter. They are desperate for liquidity. They're willing to sell their debt portfolios, even the good ones, at a discount to improve their balance sheet. Clay smiled for the first time that day. A cold, sharp smile. Call David Chen, he ordered. Tell him we need to liquidate the entire long-term investment fund. Everything. Sarah was stunned. Dad, that's the entire family's savings. It's your and Mom's retirement fund. If this fails... This is no longer about money. My girl, Clay interrupted, his eyes looking out the window, where a man was planting a small flag to mark the location of a golf sand trap. This is a war for survival. Karen wants to take our soul, so we will take her entire empire. He picked up the phone, dialing the number of his longtime financial advisor. David, he said, his voice allowing no room for objection. I need you to execute a transaction. A big one. Prepare to acquire a debt from the Green Valley Commerce Bank. That's right, the debt of the Eden Springs HOA. I'm in the car. Send it, Clay's voice rasped over the phone, cutting through the sound of the wind whipping past as his old pickup truck sped through the night. He wasn't calling from the safety of his office anymore, with 36 hours remaining. He was driving to David Chen's office in the city, a 2-hour journey. His handwritten signature was the last thing needed to liquidate the assets his family had built over a century. On the other end of the line, Sarah, with dark circles under her eyes, hit the send button on her screen. An encrypted email containing her entire financial analysis flew to David Chen's server. Sent, Dad. David is waiting. The bank has agreed in principle. They just need the final liquidation order with your signature. But Dad, they said that once the transaction starts, it can't be stopped. Good, Clay replied curtly. He stepped on the truck's engine roaring. This was the point of no return. Meanwhile, in her luxurious office, Karen Duvall was smirking. One of her lawyers had just reported Sarah West tried to file for an emergency injunction. As predicted, it got lost in the system. No one will find it until Friday afternoon. By then, we'll have already flattened the old man's barn. Excellent, Karen said, as she signed a lucrative contract with a golf course construction company. Make sure the enforcement team is there at 8 a.m. sharp tomorrow. I want pictures of him being dragged out of his house. It will send a powerful message to anyone else who dares to stand in the way of progress. Just then, her chief financial officer walked in, looking slightly puzzled. Mrs. Duvall, there's something a bit strange. The Green Valley Commerce Bank just announced they've sold the entire debt portfolio for the Eden Springs project, a massive cash transaction completed in just a few hours. Karen paused. They sold it to whom? They wouldn't say. Client confidentiality? But it's an unusual move. Who would buy such a large block of debt so quickly? Karen scoffed, dismissing the concern. It's probably some investment fund in New York that sees our potential. Fine, it just proves we're valuable. It doesn't matter who holds the debt. As long as we make our interest payments on time, we're still the ones in charge. She had made a fatal mistake, arrogance. 2 hours later, Clay walked into David Chen's office. There were no greetings. David just pushed a stack of documents across the table. Here, he said, sign this, and it all disappears. Sign this, and you either become a debtor or a king. Clay didn't hesitate. He picked up the pen and signed his name decisively. Immediately, David and his team sprang into action. Phones rang incessantly. Computer screens flickered with multi-million-dollar figures being transferred. The air in the room was thick with the tension of a top-tier financial transaction. Finally, after 15 minutes that felt like a century, David nodded. "It's done, PM." He breathed. "Welcome, Clay. You are now the creditor of the Eden Springs Homeowners Association." They had no time to celebrate. Clay and Sarah rushed back to the pickup truck. Heading back to the farm, they now had the key. The problem was, they had to find the lock before 9 a.m. the next morning. The laptop was opened right on Sarah's lap as Clay drove. They connected to the internet via their mobile phone, downloading thousands of pages of legal documents for the loan they now owned. The race against time had truly begun. Under the dim light in the truck's cabin, they read, scanned, and searched. Their eyes were strained, tired but fueled by adrenaline. They were looking for a loophole, a flaw, a buried clause. Clause 5, no. Clause so, regulations on late payments. Not it either, Sarah mumbled, her voice hoarse, just as they reached the farm gate, where Duval's sign still stood as a mockery. Sarah screamed, "Stop the truck." Clay slammed on the brakes. "What is it, honey?" I found it. Sarah turned the laptop screen towards him. Her finger trembled as she pointed to a small piece of text, buried amidst complex legal jargon. Clause 7.c, fraudulent activity. Gross financial mismanagement. Clay read each word aloud, and a fierce, cold smile spread across his face. Use of mortgaged assets for illegal activities. Forging the documents to seize our land, Sarah said, her voice filled with excitement. She used the very property she mortgaged to commit a crime. This clause allows us to... Oh my God. It allows us to freeze all their assets and demand immediate repayment. They had their weapon, a nuclear weapon. They rushed into the house. Clay didn't sit down. He paced his office, his voice echoing, sharp and steely as he dictated to Sarah, who typed. Every word was honed like a blade. Notice from creditor. Order to freeze assets. Demand for accelerated payment. The printer roared to life, spitting out the pages that would decide the fate of an empire. Clay picked them up, feeling their weight in his hands. He looked out the window. A black SUV from the HOA security team had just driven by, its headlights sweeping across the house one last time before dawn. The clock struck 2 a.m., only 7 hours left. Get the truck ready. Sarah, Clay said, his voice terrifyingly calm. We're not waiting for them to come to us. We're going to them. The eastern sky had just begun to glow pink when Clay's pickup truck stopped in front of the entrance gate to the Eden Springs residential community. There was nothing stealthy about his actions. He drove deliberately, pulling straight up to the security booth, where 2 night shift guards were dozing. One of them recognized Clay and stepped out, his expression condescending. Lost, old man, the guy said, his hand resting on his holstered gun. Your eviction order takes effect at 9 o'clock. It's just after 5 a.m. now. Get lost. Clay said nothing. He simply handed the man a paper from the file on the passenger seat. It was the first page of the creditor's file, with the official seal of the Green Valley Commerce Bank and his name clearly listed as the beneficiary. The guard frowned as he read it, the confidence on his face slowly vanishing, replaced by a look of confusion. What the hell is this? This is the paperwork that authorizes my presence on this property, Clay said, his voice as cold as steel. Now, open the gate, or I will charge you with obstructing a creditor from executing their legal rights. And believe me, I will win. The guard looked at Clay, and finally, he stepped back. He stammered into his radio, and a few seconds later, the heavy iron gate slowly swung open. Clay hit the can, driving past the perfectly paved roads, past the meticulously manicured lawns, and the million-dollar homes still shrouded in sleep. Sarah sat beside him, her heart pounding. her hands clutching the rest of the documents. They stopped in front of the clubhouse and HOA office, a magnificent structure of glass and steel. The lights inside showed that someone had already arrived early. Just as Clay had predicted, Karen Duvall was not the type to miss her moment of triumph. Clay and Sarah stepped inside. Karen was standing in the grand lobby, speaking with her head of enforcement and two of her lawyers. She was wearing a powerful red business suit, ready for a day of conquest. When she saw Clay, she burst out laughing, a laugh full of contempt. "How shabby. Mr. West, have you come to pack up your things yourself?" she sneered. "I have to say, I'm surprised. I thought you would chain yourself to the front door or do something dramatic." Clay didn't respond to the taunt. He walked straight to the marble table in the middle of the lobby and placed his file on it decisively. The sound was sharp and dry, echoing in the quiet space. "Good morning, Mrs. Duvall," he said. "I am not here as the owner of the West Farm. I am here as your primary creditor." Karen's smile froze. Her lawyers exchanged confused glances. "What nonsense are you talking about?" one of them asked. Sarah stepped forward, placing the certificate of debt assignment on top. As of 4:37 p.m. yesterday, Mr. Clay West, through a legal transaction with the Green Valley Commerce Bank, has acquired the entire $47 million mortgage loan of the Eden Springs Homeowners Association and Duvall Real Estate Holdings. Silence fell over the room. Karen blinked, trying to process the information. "No, that's impossible. That's a secured loan. It was sold," Clay said, "and now it's mine." He flipped to the next page. "And as the new creditor, I'd like to inform you of Clause 7.c of the contract you signed." He pushed a copy of the clause towards them. The lawyers snatched it, their eyes scanning the lines quickly. The color drained from their faces, shifting from confusion to a pale white. They knew exactly what it meant. Clay continued, his voice steady, but each word was like a hammer blow. "Your use of mortgaged assets and HOA funds to finance an illegal activity, specifically the forgery of documents and the conspiracy to seize my land, is a material breach of this clause. Therefore," he placed the final sheet of paper on the table. It lay there, simple yet powerful. "Order to freeze assets and demand for accelerated payment. I am invoking my rights. All assets of the HOA and Duvall Holdings, including all bank accounts, properties, and this very building, are frozen, effective immediately, and the entire debt of $47 million, plus interest and penalties, is due right now." The silence shattered. One of the lawyers stammered, "This is absurd. We'll sue." "Be my guest," Sarah replied, her voice as sharp as any lawyer's. "In the meantime, your client's assets remain frozen. Not a single cent can go in or out. You can't make payroll. You can't pay contractors. You can't sell a single lot. Your empire is dead in the water." Karen finally understood. She looked from the paper to Clay's placid face. Her perfect plan, her abuse of power, had all crumbled because of a clause she had overlooked, and because she had fatally underestimated the farmer she sought to destroy. She didn't have $47 million. No one did. She was finished. The arrogance vanished, leaving only raw despair. She trembled, her face flushed with rage and humiliation. You can't do this," she shrieked, her voice breaking. "This is mine. It's all mine." She reached out as if to grab the documents. But the head of enforcement, who had just realized where the true power now lay, gave a slight shake of his head. He wasn't going to challenge a creditor with such absolute legal authority. Karen Duvall, the powerful woman who had once screamed at Clay, could now only stand there, her hands limp at her sides. A helpless, choked scream escaped her throat, a sound of complete collapse. Clay West looked at the woman breaking down before him. He felt no glee, only a profound sense of peace. He had protected his legacy. He picked up the court order he had just issued, the enemy's own weapon that he now wielded more skillfully than they ever could. He smiled, a calm smile that carried the weight of justice, and said, loud enough for everyone in the room to hear, "The law is not on the side of the greedy." Then he left. A year passed. Eden Springs became a community under new management, a self-governing residence council. Elected by the homeowners, the tyrannical rules were eliminated. The residents respected Clay not because he was rich, but because he knew how to use the law to fight injustice without resorting to petty revenge. And Karen Weissbury, she lost all her assets, became entangled in lawsuits, and was torn apart by the media. But what hurt her the most was being shunned by the very community that once feared her. She lived quietly in a small rented apartment in another city, avoiding all cameras. Clay West has proven that knowledge, determination, and a strong heart can defeat any evil plot. This story is a reminder that justice always exists for those who know how to fight. Thank you for following this dramatic journey. Please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts on Clay's revenge.